going to call to order this work session by the Committee for the Taxation, Cultivation, Manufacture, and Commercial Sale of Marijuana in Anchorage. We'll begin with introductions, and I'm going to have, I'll start with you, Mr. Herman, as you're going to be a staff for this committee.
Staff to this committee.
Trade just others, I may remember.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Bernie Hall.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Welcome, Ms. Tucker.
Thank you.
I have no idea if our other two committee members are going to make it today, Ms. Dembowski as well as Mr. Honeman, and it may be that that'll be the last time you hear me refer to them as Mr. Honeman and Ms. Dembowski. I kind of like work sessions to be in the format of a work session and a little more informal. I will recognize people, but I think we'll operate better on a first name basis. And what I wanted to do prior to the holidays was bring the committee together for the first time and just kind of lay out some goals and objectives. Mr. Ira and myself have already met. Our chairman, Dick, agreed. I told him when he asked me to be the chair of this, the thing that I was going to need was some resources to be able to do it, and that would mean a staff person. So we're contracting with Mr. Herman to handle that aspect for us because we've got a tremendous amount of information to gather, an unbelievable amount of coordination to do, because we intend to have numerous public hearings over the process and the time of this occurring. We had a great meeting yesterday with Senator McGuire. She was on teleconference when we talked with her, but her staff was with us. And they have got, they're kind of like the deer in the headlight because they know they've got a tremendous task ahead of them. But there is an unbelievable amount of communication going on that we became very clear. Senator McGuire will be handling this on the Senate side, and then Representative Ledoux will be handling it on the House side. They're going to have a read across on their bills so that if for some reason the House or the Senate stalls, they'll be working jointly so they'll be able to continue through the other side. It was really interesting in having the conversation with them yesterday because we're all very well aware of the fact that the community voted to make this legal, the community of the state of Alaska, but they really gave the tough assignment to the elected officials in that we have been charged with making it safe, accountable, and responsible for the people that are going to be growing, processing, and selling this product. A really interesting question that we engaged them in a conversation yesterday was about who is going to test this. And they've accepted the fact that that is going to be at the state level. They have no idea yet who's going to do that because you're looking at a lab that is to certify the product, but they don't know that there's anybody to certify the lab. So that is something that I'm sure we're going to be engaging a great deal, or they are, with the states of Colorado and with Washington, because they've already been out there kind of developing this and obviously stumbling on occasion and learning from their mistakes. And we really hope that we have the ability to be able to learn from all of the mistakes that they've got. But what we do know for a fact is on February 24th of next year, the decriminalization of personal possession goes into law. And they've got to have that dealt with because at that point, individuals will be able to have 6 marijuana plants. My understanding is 3 mature, and I guess 3 in the process of becoming mature plants. But it all has to be basically occur behind closed doors. You're not allowed to have it in public. And the thing that I felt pretty good about in leaving that meeting is they basically have all of the questions that we've got in our mind. But they know that their responsibilities are going to be getting the regulations written. And, there's a bit of an issue in that because that's probably going to be developing at 3 different levels. There will be legislation that they will be writing. At this point in time, the Alcohol Beverage Control Board in the legislation is mentioned on numerous occasions as possibly the people that would be writing the regulations. So Ira and I will be meeting with Cynthia Franklin. Tomorrow. She is the executive director of the Anchorage of the ABC board. So it'll be interesting to get her take on how this is all going to pull together. The thing that they're going to have such a challenge about is they've got a 90-day session coming up. They know they've got 9 months to write the regulation. There's no regulation to be adopted without the legislature in session. So there's already the discussion of the possibility of a special legislative session at some point just to deal with this topic, depending on how they fare in drafting legislation. We ended up with the analogy that I was in the custom manufacturing furniture business for a lot of years, and I told them, I said, the thing that I always accomplished what I had architects and designers constantly come into me with designs. And I shared with them, I said, anybody can draw a flying horse. Building the horse and making it fly gets to be a challenge sometimes. And I think we are a bit into that scenario with what we're going to be dealing with during this process. But the thing that is a given is we will be following the state. The state's going to have to get their regulations. They're going to have to figure out the labs, the certification, how that part is going to be managed. However, it would be my intention, and I'll certainly let Mr. Peterson weigh in here in a moment, but it would be my intention on a parallel mission that we be working to be prepared as those regulations come down, that we've already looked at drafting our conditional use permits. And in order to do that, the first people that we're going to do a strong outreach to is going to be all of our community councils, because our conditional use permit requires by code that when one comes before the body, we have to put it through community councils, give them time to do the notification and handle it, and come back to us with their support or non-support of a conditional use permit. But I'm hoping that what we will be able to do over this period of time is come up with a standard conditional use, because quite frankly, we have a bit of a nightmare in our liquor license conditional use. And we've got a chance to, this is going to be a fresh start where we've evolved over a lot of years with liquor conditional use permits, in that the first time conditional use permits were issued, it came out of the planning department, and the assembly really didn't have anything to do with it. Then we started to have issues with liquor license. We asked that they come to us, then we asked for input from community councils. So we've got conditional use permits that liquor stores have that are basically, yes, you've got a right to occupy that space and sell liquor, while we've got others that actually restrict what they can sell, how they have to market, relatively restricted. And that's almost to the point of being an unfair practice, because any commercial operation should all be operating on the same plane. So with this one, I think we're going to have the time to get the input from our community councils, work on it ourselves, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with a standard conditional use permit that would be the same conditions to everybody that operates this. The legislature is still going to be dealing, and they have no idea specifically on this, the number of licenses. With the liquor license, it's based on population. Whether they're going to take the same approach in regards to licensing for marijuana, they really don't know right now. It's definitely something that they're having serious discussions about. So the reality is they have more questions than answers. We are definitely at that level ourselves, but I'm hoping that, I'm going to push to be at the point that when the state gets their regulations passed and adopted, then we will have some conditional use, a base conditional use, and then we will look at if there's something they don't cover in state regulation that we want to cover on a local level, that we'll be able to do it. But our goal would be that by the time the state is ready to issue licenses, we as a community would be prepared to be able to look at issuing conditional use permits, but with the understanding that when the provider will not be able to apply for a permit until they get a license, and then we've got a date in municipal code that states we have to give public notice. Community councils have to have time to take action and return that back to us before we actually take action on it. So it wouldn't be that somebody's going to be able to come in with a license, apply, and get a conditional use and go out the door. That local public process is going to have to occur, because the one thing that I'm going to repeat in every meeting is I would be a heads up to anybody that's looking at investing in this business. Be careful what you spend until you've got a conditional use permit, because just because you apply, that doesn't mean that we may not have a group in a community that just flat says, no, we don't want that in our community. And we typically take a pretty strong stand in following the direction of our individual community councils and communities in regards to what we permit inside of those. So with that, Mr. Peterson.
Well, I think you've laid out a pretty good case for what some of the decisions we have to make are. Another thing I think we have to look at is whether we want to have a limited number of permits, similar to the way we have with our alcoholic liquor licenses, or do we want to go with an unlimited number of permits, sort of like the way Alaska does business licenses. Anybody that wants a business license, you just apply for one and you get it. Because what we found out, the value of these liquor licenses is rather high because there's a limited number of them. And also, it's the same thing with the taxi permits. And we found out now that Uber's coming to town, that we could get ourselves in a financial bind and be sued because of the value of all those taxi cab permits that, depending on how we deal with Uber, or Uber, however you want to pronounce it, could cause the taxi industry to want to sue us, or Uber to want to sue us, or both to want to sue us. And so I think we need to keep in mind when we're starting out, I mean, we're at point zero, so every decision we make, is going to affect everything going forward. So we've got a lot of considerations that we have to look at from the beginning to try to hopefully get this done right the first time.
I agree. I think our conditional use permits would be directly, just like they are with our liquor license, directly related to the number of licenses that the state issues. So that, once again, would be something we would be following the state when they finally decide how many, I mean, if they're going to limit, if they're not going to limit, or what's going to happen. In that regard, they've got a tremendous amount that they're going to have to deal with before we really have a product to work with in the local community. But what we do know is, once they write their regulations, we have to follow their regulations, but we can make ours more stringent in our conditional use if we choose to do that.
Right.
So,
Well, we can also, so to speak, lobby the legislature. If we think that we have got an idea of the right direction that we want to go, we definitely want to communicate that to our legislators when they're writing the regulations.
and they have been very clear. Senator McGuire yesterday was they want us to be on a parallel with them. They want to have a very open line of communication from us. They absolutely want our input, because without a doubt, we are the largest community in the state, and the largest number of licenses going to be in our community. So they're going to be receptive to anything and everything that we want to suggest or give direction to them. So I was very pleased about how open that conversation has been. We will also be reaching out to Representative Ledoux because they will be handling, like I say, a bill on their side as well, parallel with us. What we've got, we prepared a packet for all of the committee members, and it's just got some basic information in it. But if you look at under tab 3, Pete, we've got our scope and objective, timing, task, deliverables, lines of authority and communication, and you can see that we fall below the federal government and the state of Alaska, because they've got to address all of those. One thing that we were very pleased about, but it'll be interesting to see how this one gets resolved, is the indication that we've got from Senator McGuire is they see the municipality having a separate taxation on this to them. The state will tax, the municipality would do its own taxing on this product. So we'll see how that ends up in the final format in regards to regulations. We've got a copy of the actual legislation itself in here that passed. So we've got it for you to be able to go through and read and figure out. A lot of work. Mr. Sherwood, who I saw come in,
Over here now.
is our legal advisor on this, and I understand that you're going to be going out to a conference here next month that Washington and Colorado are doing jointly. You want to share with us a little bit about exactly what that is?
Yes, and I brought some copies for the other members of the committee, but it's, this is put on by the Colorado Police Chiefs Association, January 14th through the 16th. It's kind of a 3-day lessons learned conference, and it covers everything from criminal to civil in terms of what they've encountered, how they're dealing with issues, local regulation.
Excuse me, you didn't have copies for the public. It's required under the law.
We'll get
You're
you
available, I'm sure.
That's violating the law. By not
We'll
having
get you on
copies.
Mr. Haberman.
Mr. Haberman.
Mr. Haberman, this was not the committee, this is something provided.
Did you also notice some other
We're getting copies right now.
but you also refer other information there that the public has not seen in this meeting? No, it's not part of that. I noticed you're looking at other stuff there. That's not.
Anyway, myself and Seneca Thino, who's the head of our prosecution division, plan to go. Cindy Franklin and others from the ABC board plan to go. But it looks like it'll be very, very informative, and I think we can learn a lot in a very short time about what we want to do, what we don't want to do up here, and from everything that they've experienced in the last 2 years.
Okay. I believe we're also going to have Erica McConnell from the planning department go to that. I think you're going, Ms. Tucker.
And I'm thinking that Ira should go if at all possible. Todd talked to me about this earlier this morning and thought that maybe committee members would, and I had forgotten that you were committee of staff.
Right.
But I think in terms of I got to go to Imlin. We had just a 1-hour session from the municipal attorney's office on their experience, and it was so good. I mean, they were just on top of it. And so this involves so many more aspects of that. And now that it's really here, I was there before the vote in Baltimore and frantically taking notes. But I think that and Cynthia Franklin, who you mentioned as head of the ABC board, she was our municipal prosecutor here that has now been replaced by Seneca, and so she, the attorney's office has, continues to have a very good relationship with Cynthia Franklin, and she, in turn, will have a good relationship with these people, and so I just think that that's an avenue that if the committee considers that, and if it fit into a schedule, that, because it's not just for the attorneys, it's for staff members and policymakers and, everybody all.
We're definitely going to have a participation in this. I'm one of those people that's always cautious of expenditures, and if I can send 2 people and bring the information back to us, but I think it's really critical that Eric and Mr. Trainee and I are having conversations on a regular basis in regards to who we want to have go. But we're very excited about the fact that this is coming up. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people from the legislature as well in attendance, because there's no doubt about it, at this point in time, they have a much bigger bite of the apple than we do in getting prepared to see how the state's going to.
As I understand it, our ballot initiative was based on the Colorado model. Not to say there aren't lessons to be learned from the Washington model, but ours was based on that. And they're having local, state, and federal officials all speaking at this conference. So I think it'll be very worthwhile.
Well, and something that I heard about from a friend of mine that used to live here in Alaska that lives in Washington State now, and that they have a problem with supply. They've got, the corner mom and pop sales locations all set up and running, but they didn't give enough lead time to the growing segment of the business so that they would have, enough product built up enough so that when they opened that they weren't going to be out. And so like any other, business, the price depends on supply and demand. So if the supply is low and demand is high, then the prices are really high. And part of the reason that the legalization was passed was because they're trying to get away from the black market. And so you're never going to do away with the black market unless you can compete with the black market price-wise. And so I think we have to make sure that when we set this all up, that we give enough lead time to the grower segment so that when the retail outlets open up, there is sufficient supply available so that we don't end up having much higher prices than what they buy on the street right now.
Well, they got to, I'm assuming when they do licensing, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 different. One's going to be a license to grow. The grower may be the processor too, but there may be separate people that are doing the processing. And then you've got the people that don't have the license for sale of the product. And I'm assuming the testing falls in there someplace as far as the lab. And the state at this point is really not sure exactly how they're going to handle that part of it, whether that's something that a company comes in and provides. They're just not sure how.
So that could be a business opportunity for someone to set up a testing lab here in Anchorage or somewhere within the state of Alaska, or maybe several different cities across the state, who knows?
Right. What we will be doing, though, is we're definitely looking for direct feedback from the community councils, but we will be scheduling a number of town halls that we will invite the entire community, anybody and everybody in. We will have those at the Lusac Library when we do it in the Assembly Chamber, so we can accommodate whatever groups of people that we have coming. And it will be, once we begin doing those, honestly, what we'll do is hold a number of those, a series of them, until we get to the point where we feel that we've given an opportunity to people that want to be a part and give us opinions on this. But the goal is going to be to get that part taken care of so we could begin to work on preliminary conditional use permits awaiting the regulation that's passed by the state. Anything else, Mr. Peterson?
I'm sure there's plenty else. It's,
Like I say, this is first blush, first meeting, handing out binders to the committee, just letting everybody understand what we're hoping to do. We did hand out on the table over there is the Assembly Committee regulating taxing, so it's got our scope and objective, timing, tasks, deliverables that we do. I'm sure that at our next meeting, we may have some modifications on this because I'll be looking to the committee to look at anything that we may need to add to address this, but we've got a lot to deal with. So, Mr. Trainee, anything that you want to add?
Nothing to know what kind of sports leader. We're usually doing this.
We're going to do it. We will also establish scheduled meetings. We will probably start out originally at one meeting a month, but I suspect before we get too far into this, we may have enough of a workload that we may have to do twice a month in order to be able to accomplish the job. And if we have to go to more than that toward the end of the task. But, the reality is we're looking at May, best case scenario for the state actually issues a license, it would appear, under the timeline that they're working with. So if you have nothing else, we will take a few moments for any comments from the audience that's with us today. Public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Eugene Haberman. I represent myself. As you are familiar, I monitor how you conduct these public meetings. I couldn't help but note that you scheduled this meeting a week when I don't know of any other city meeting being held, and you would think that, like City of Palmersville and Houston don't hold any meetings, so encourage public to be attending this thing. The information you had was not complete. Even that document there is not the only document. You referenced another document too that was not part for the public to see. You don't have this information like the agenda out on the website that I see. So the end result is the public doesn't know what you're going to discuss. Public needs to see that. I've stressed this thing before. You shouldn't be holding these meetings here where a limited part of the public could be at. And this announcement went out on the 19th. The city's got a policy of only a 48-hour notice for holding a public meeting. That's not reasonable notice at all. Way unreasonable. And the cities in the valley don't do that. They're more in compliance. You kept on saying about engaging the public in this meeting, public participation. You'll constantly set community council. Well, engaging the public means appropriate notice. Get the public know when these meetings are, not this last-minute notice. As far as I can see, it has been monitoring your operation since April 4, 2012, on notice and so forth. It's still a sham on how you engage the public before you make a decision. And when you continue doing that, continue breaking the law like this, and I've said it before, Open Meetings Act and a separate state law providing a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard, the end result is grounds for a recall. It's also voice actions whatever you take. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haberman, I appreciate what you do. I do. We do follow municipal code. I know you don't believe that, but I also note for the record that I appreciate everything you do, but I do know that you're not a resident nor a voter in this community, that you make a deal of doing the same thing to the people in the valley, and that's fine. I'll give you a time to speak, but we provide, this is a working document for the body, for the committee, so we'll follow up. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Bruce Schulte with the Coalition for Responsible Cannabis Legislation. I just want to thank you for taking this on. I think that this committee was discussed at the Assembly meeting last Tuesday, and I applaud the quick response to that need, and I appreciate your efforts. I particularly appreciate your comments about the process and the coordination with the state, and Mr. Peterson's comments about the imperative of getting this right so that we can encourage the black market to move to a legitimate business model. I applaud what you're doing. I thank you for it, and I look forward to a very positive outcome. Thanks.
Anyone else? You know, I'll point out, we're a committee of 4 now, and we have people that say, well, how do you work when you're 4? You could be a 2-2 split. Most of you that have attended committee meetings on the Assembly, basically what we do is prepare a word and deliver it to the body. It takes an action of the body to do whatever, and we work in consensus in this committee, but I will assure you that this committee is not going to do anything to circumvent the process to deliver this to the body for adoption, and it will be very open all the way through this process. So, and I appreciate all of you attending. If there's nothing else for us today, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.